So we may begin with the session. So,
has everyone joined?
We almost have all the participants, so we can begin.
Dr.
A very warm afternoon to everyone present. I, Stuti Jain, your host for today, on the behalf of my hardworking team and our institute, Delhi Metropolitan Education, welcome you all to the International Symposium on Deliberations on Rethinking the Environment, Sustainability in Modern Era. This is Technical Session 5, Sustainable Conservation of Biodiversity, where participants across the globe will be sharing their views and opinions regarding the protection of biodiversity and its components. Now, I would like to take this opportunity to warmly welcome our honorable chairs for this session, Dr. Rajesh Pratap Singh and Mr. Kishore Rethinking. Dr. Rajesh Pratap Singh, sir, is a professor at GB Pant University of Agriculture and Technology, Pantnagar. Sir has done BSc in Agriculture from ND University of Agriculture and Technology, Faizabad, and later did his MSc and PhD from GB Pant University of Agriculture and Technology, Pantnagar. Along with teaching and guiding thesis research, Sir is working as local program coordinator at All India Coordinated Research Project on maize, office in charge in plant clinic, and deputy coordinator at Rural Agriculture Work Experience Program. Sir is keenly interested in research projects. He has developed various plant protection training modules for Krishi Vigyan Kendra. Sir is also a member of selection board of CSIR and many scientific committees of Government of India. We welcome you, sir. We are delighted to have you with us here. We also have Mr. Kishore Rethinking, sir. Sir is the founder of Nature Conservation Society, Amravati, and Satpudha Foundation, Governing Council member of Bombay Natural History Society. Sir has done his postgraduate diploma in International Wildlife Conservation Practices from University of Oxford. He has been working as a conservation practitioner for more than 30 years in central India. His work with the local communities, academicians, field biologists, media, politicians, and administrators for conservation of Satpudha landscape is well recognized at national and international fora. Sir has served on many policy-making bodies, including the National Board for Wildlife, Maharashtra State Board for Wildlife. Sir is also a member of World Commission on Protected Areas and Commission on Ecosystem Management. He had visited several countries for training, attending courses and conferences. Sir has appointed as president of 3rd All India and 32nd Maharashtra Bird Watchers Meet held at Karat, Maharashtra. And in 2020, he was appointed as president of 2nd Paryavaran Sahitya Sammelan, Jalgaon. Sir has been awarded with several national and international awards like Tiger Link Award, Fellowship of Ashoka, Washington, and many more. We welcome you, sir, and we are delighted to have you here with us today. Before commencing the session, I would like to inform all the participants that the total time allotted to the speaker is 10 minutes. The speaker shall be allotted 8 minutes for presenting and remaining 2 minutes for the question by the chair. With due permission of the chair, I would like to call upon our first presenter. Our first presenter is Mr. Manoj Kumar Gupta along with Mr. Vinod Kumar Yadav, presenting on the topic Awareness for Mainstreaming of Wildlife Crime Issues.
Hello, myself Vinod Kumar Yadav, and my co-author is Dr. Manoj Kumar Gupta. But on the behalf of Manoj Kumar Gupta, I am here to present my topic, Awarenesses for Mainstreaming of Wildlife Crime Issues. First of all, I would like to wish Professor Dr. Rajesh Pratap Singh ji and Mr. Kishore Rethinking. Today I am here to present my topic. My topic is Awarenesses for Mainstreaming of Wildlife Crimes.
Nidhi ma'am, can you please kindly mute your mic? Nidhi ma'am, can you hear me?
Hello, Hanji.
Ma'am, can you please mute your mic?
Okay.
Thank you. Yes, please, sir.
Yes, sir. Sir, my objective, I start again. My topic is awarenesses for mainstreaming of wildlife crime. The objective of my study is to find out the issues on conservation of wildlife. Second is to discuss on awarenesses of conservation of wildlife. And the last one is to focus on measures to protect wildlife. Wildlife is a part of nature, and thus the natural resources conservation is the innate nature of India. Wildlife is facing threat across the world, and India's flora and fauna continues to be in demand in illegal market across the world. Many species are on the verge of extinction due to illegal trade in wildlife. The industry is thriving as chains of organized wildlife crime spread across the world. With the illegal trade in wildlife in India booming, there is high demand for our wildlife and flora across the world. Due to this, the illegal trade of wild animals take place brutally across the border. Major species of wildlife smuggled through airports include star turtle, birds, mulberries, shoals, various parts of tiger and leopard, ivory, rhinoceros, pangolin and pangolin skins, ostrich, seahorses, cucumbers, skins of reptiles, live snake, lizard, coral, and medical herbs, medicinal herbs. Now we come to the need to protect wildlife. It is very important to protect our wildlife. There are so many reasons. First of all is due to human activities, the number of wildlife is continuously decreasing all over the world. In view of this crisis, World Wildlife Day is celebrated every year on 3rd March to raise awarenesses on the importance of wildlife and flora. The main objective of the World Life Day is to establish awarenesses, cooperation, and coordination towards the conservation of wildlife at the global level. These three are the main points: awarenesses, cooperation, and coordination. With the help of these, we can protect the wildlife. In continuation to this, the theme of the year 2021 was forest and livelihood, sustaining people and the planet. That is to keep the earth alive along with humans. It is very important for animals, birds, and plants to live. Today, many species of animal and plants are on the verge of extinction. Therefore, it is our duty to protect the natural splendor of the ecosystem and to develop a system of coexistence with every living being on Earth. Conservation of wildlife in India has been consistent since the beginning. The government enacted the Wildlife Protection Act in 1972 to prevent wildlife crimes, to check poaching, and to effectively check illegal trade in wildlife products. We have to see our wildlife as a priceless asset. We have to contribute in increasing their numbers by keeping them in proper environment, include sanctuaries, wildlife parks, national parks, etc. At the international and national level. For the protection of forest and wildlife in India, there are Environment Protection Act, Forest Protection Act, National Wildlife Action Plan, Tiger Project, National Parks and Sanctuaries, Bioregional Reserves Program, etc. Due to these plans, some species have been saved from extinction. It includes lion, rubber lion, one honored rhinoceros, elephant, crocodile, etc. Not only all these animals, but also many types of plants and trees have started gaining a new life. The next one is measures to protect wildlife. To protect, preserve, and improve wildlife, the central government of India has come up with the following legislations: Prevention of Cruelty to Animal Act 1960, Wildlife Protection Act 1972, Biological Diversity Act 2002. The Ministry of Environment and Forest has taken several measures to save and conserve the wildlife in the country. These measures are as follows: provided legal protection against hunting of wildlife, including their exploitation and commercial exploitation under the provisions of the Wildlife Protection Act 1972. The Wildlife Protection Act 1972 provides for punishment for offenses relating to the contravention of its provisions. There is also a provision in this law for confiscation of any equipment, vehicle, or weapon used for committing offense against wild animals. Next one is protected areas have been created under the provisions of Wildlife Protection Act 1972, which include national parks, sanctuaries, important wildlife habitats across the country to protect the wildlife and their habitats. Next one, Wildlife Crime Control Bureau. It's a main body. Wildlife Crime Control Bureau has been constituted to control illegal trade in wildlife, wild animal, and their products. The Central Bureau of Investigation, CBI, has been empowered to arrest people who have committed crimes against wildlife under the Wildlife Protection Act 1972. Next one, a measure to protect wildlife in India. State, union territories, government have been requested to increase patrolling in and around the protected areas. Now I come to the conclusion. Important work like forest conservation cannot possibly be done by observing plantation beak. For this, work is needed on the lines of really important schemes, reality important schemes, not even for a week or 2 or months, but for years. This is the main thing. Second is in recent decades, humans have overexploited natural resources for their needs, a result of which large forests are on the verge of extinction. At the same time, the hunting of animals has also increased, due to which the crisis of their extinction has arisen. While on the one hand, the forests are getting destroyed, on the other hand, pollution is also increasing continuously, which is causing negative change in nature, and catastrophic consequences like global warming are being seen. In such a situation, World Wildlife Day is extremely important for the protection of nature and wildlife. There is an urgent need to create awarenesses, take action, and strictly enforce laws to end all kind of illegal wildlife trade that threaten biodiversity, and the security of forest is required. The conservation of wildlife is important due to both economic and ecological reasons. Preservation of wildlife is important for maintaining the ecological balance in the environment and sustaining the ecological chain. Environment, this is directly related to the environment, and today we can see the position of environment is getting down and down and down. I hear Miss Menka Gandhi. She told us that about so many crises related to the environment. I want to give only one example. that she told, if we consume 1 kilo chicken, then we have to waste 5,000 liter water. So there is a urgent need to protect our wildlife. There is urgent need to protect our environment, and without environment we cannot survive. Thank you, sir.
Now paper is open for discussion. Is there any question from the panel that is present here? Am I audible?
Hello, sir.
Yes, sir, you're perfectly audible.
Am I audible? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
So, is there any question from the panel that is visible here? Or Mr. Kishore is the right person to ask any question because it belongs to his area of expertise? Mr. Rithe?
Yes, Mr. Vinod Kumar.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
sir.
your title is awareness. Your title is awareness, and you have given many provisions of the Wildlife Protection Act, and especially emphasis on Wildlife Protection Act. So, what kind of awareness you would like to do as far as the Wildlife Protection Act is concerned? You have spoken about several species which are into wildlife trade. But right now, if you look at the scenario, the poaching and wildlife trade is increasing in our country. So what particular measures you would like to suggest that awareness must be done, but how, where, which are the target audience? Can you please elaborate on this?
Due to very short time, I have made this short presentation. I have detailed writing in my research paper, because the protection safeguards are important, and it is related to the environment. So I mentioned only some of points in my presentation at this time.
Yeah, Mr. Binod, I have
Yes, sir.
one point. Just I wanted to know, as far as wildlife concerned, crimes are concerned, that there are two aspects. One is the organized crime that is committed by the habitual criminals. So
Yes.
they know what they are doing. So we have
Yes.
nothing to do with those people, except that we have to enforce the laws that is we have in our hands. Okay. Second
Yes.
one, that the problem is coming up due to the conflict between the human being and the wild animals, particularly those who are living in the periphery of the national parks or the forest area. Like in our own state, I am living in the nearby area of the Jim Corbett. So there
Yes,
are
sir.
many incidents we come across due to the wildlife damage. This is one issue. Second one, mostly whenever we are going to any farmers meeting, mostly farmers raise the issue that they are not able to grow the crops due to the monkey damage.
Animal.
Yeah.
So due to animal.
Yeah. So mostly what is my perception is that mostly when we say awareness, so individual has the very little role in that one, because basically it is the society or it is the government as such have to take the action to minimize the conflict between the human being and the wildlife. Okay.
Yes,
Are you getting my point?
Yes, sir. I'm getting.
Awareness is to be focused towards the society and to the policy makers, that what type of action is to be initiated, rather than it should be a public or it is a person centric. Okay. So
yes, sir.
That is my point.
Sir.
Yeah.
Sir, I want to say that this is a nowadays it is a common problem that there is no combination, we can say, or other this is the every little member and every person should pay awareness. Only laws cannot protect to the farmer. Farmers, just we use animals only for milk and then go away forest. So we should pay awareness, we should care, we should protect, and the government of state and central government, both government should maintain some laws and some houses for animals. Yes, sir.
Basically, Mr. Binod, the question, the answer lies in the topic of the session. That is the biodiversity, conservation of the biodiversity. Just to take one example of the monkey damage or monkey menace. Basically, if you are not providing the habitat in the forest, if it is the monoculture only, if you are growing only the chichir plant, pine trees, so there is no food in the forest. So the answer is that you have to diversify your plantation or your forest so that these animals get their food in their own habitat. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And this is the basically a policy issue. This is the policy issue and
policy issue, sir.
Okay, that is my point.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I know, sir. This is a policy issue.
Mr. Kishore, if you have any other point, so we can discuss, or otherwise we can move to the next point.
Thank you, sir.
We can't hear you.
Sir, I can't hear Mr. Kishore, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Sir, you spoke about the Biodiversity Act, but Biodiversity Act talks about the different species. And the Wildlife Protection Act 1972 talks about protection of all the scheduled species which have been mentioned in the schedules of Wildlife Protection Act. So they are two different acts. And you had rightly pointed out that there is an organized crime which can be dealt very strictly by law enforcement. And regarding awareness issue, our chairperson had already given second example where like the crop losses. So there you need to educate the community like farmers who are actually putting wire snares, etc. to protect for crop protection mainly. They don't want to kill wild animals, but they want to protect their crops. So that's how you need to address that issue, provide relief to the farmers, and do the awareness that if you get involved in this crime, then you will be behind the bar. So, and you don't want to kill the wild animals, so intentionally. So I think there is a role of awareness. So that's where, so your target audience should be farmers as far as the awareness is concerned. And as far as the criminal is concerned, organized crime is concerned, there you need to explain them the law, and you need to do the awareness of the law enforcement agencies so that they will deal with this issue very strictly. So they have to do law enforcement strictly. So that's how you can go ahead with this provisions of the Wildlife Protection Act, I think. Thank you.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
sir.
Thank you, Mr. Binod.
Welcome, sir. Welcome.
Shall we move to next? Am I audible? Hello?
Yeah, you can go to the next speaker.
Okay, sir. Up next, we have Mr. Prakhar Sharma and Ms. Shraddha Tomar presenting their paper on sustainability in agriculture sector and green growth. Mr. Prakhar Sharma.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Warm regards to the respected chair and a very good afternoon to one and all present here. Could you please allow me to screen share?
You're having the permission.
Is my screen visible?
Yes, please proceed.
So a very good afternoon to one and all present here. Today I, Prakhar Sharma, along with my co-author Ms. Shraddha Tomar, will be presenting before the topic of research, sustainability in agriculture sector and green growth. So let us just quickly skim through the table of contents. Firstly, there will be an introduction, then we'll discuss our research objectives and sustainability in farming, consumer behavior towards green sustainable agricultural products, and then finally the conclusion. So the introduction. So the first question which arises is, why did we choose this particular topic? The agriculture sector is the most vital sector of our Indian economy. However, this sector contributes the most to environmental degradation. So we were intrigued by the methods and policies that we need to adopt in order to switch to the sustainable model of this particular sector, which not only saves the environment, but also ushers us into the path of green growth. Now, how did we conduct our research? We conducted our research using personalized interviews and organized questionnaires using different sampling techniques. Where did we conduct our research? Our research was conducted in Bicholi Martana village, which is located in district Indore. So our research objectives. The first research objective of ours is to study about the ground reality of sustainable farming in India. Secondly, to perform a comparative study between conventional and sustainable farming. Third, to study the consumer behavior towards green and sustainable products. And finally, to study about the efficacy of government policies and the reasons behind reluctance of this sector to switch to sustainable model. Now, the sustainability in farming. The agricultural systems of the world have been one of the top contributors in environmental degradation. The conventional practices of agriculture have led to loss of soil fertility. The prolonged use of chemical agents such as fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, etc. have started turning once plush and fertile areas into wastelands. On your screen is the Sustainable Development Goal number 2, adopted by United Nations in its post-2015 agenda, which states that end hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition, and promote sustainable agriculture. So the question arises, what exactly is sustainability? Sustainability is meeting the need of the present generation without compromising with the need of the coming generations. Now, why is it that sustainability is needed in agriculture? There are multiple harmful effects of conventional farming. Conventional farming involves an extensive use of chemical agents such as fertilizers, chemical-based fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, etc. Now, these fertilizers, when used excessively, they take away the soil fertility. Furthermore, these fertilizers, the harmful chemicals of these fertilizers and pesticides, etc., get accumulated in the crops, which are eventually consumed by the consumer. Then furthermore, those chemicals get accumulated in the consumer's body, which can cause serious health hazards. So what can be done? The only solution to this is sustainable agriculture. Now, here is a comparative study between conventional and sustainable farming. These are some statistical parameters that we use. As I said earlier, the sample space is Picholi Mardana village of Indore. And we bifurcated our sample space into two pools. First pool, that is pool A or pool 1, comprising farmers practicing conventional farming, and pool B or pool 2, comprising farmers practicing sustainable farming belonging to the Jaivik Setu Cooperative Society. Here on your screen is the first statistic, which is of pool A, comprising conventional farmers. Out of the 25 farmers that we personally interviewed, only 2 had prior knowledge about organic farming. Astoundingly, only 1 had knowledge about the government incentives that are available to organic farmers. 25 out of 25 farmers were using urea, and 24 out of 25 farmers were using other chemical-based agents such as herbicide, DDT, etc. Second statistic that I would like to throw some light upon is the variety of crops grown. If you look at it, you will find that 24 out of 25 farmers are cultivating wheat. The main reason behind this popularity of wheat amongst the farmers is the minimum supportive price. Wheat is a crop which is backed by minimum supportive price. Furthermore, the conventional farmers were much more concerned with the traditional crops. They were reluctant to switch to other crops because, according to them, these conventional crops yielded them good revenue. Third statistic that I would like to emphasize upon is the involvement of youth in conventional farming. If you look at this pie chart, you'll find that the 20 to 30 age group, the farmers belonging to 20 to 30 age group is almost zero. 30 to 40 age group comprises 28% of our sample space, and 40 to 50 age group comprises 64% of the sample space. That means youngsters have predominantly less interest in conventional farming. Now let us come to the pool B, variety of crops grown. Pool B comprises the sustainable farmers. If you look at this distribution, it is more or less evenly distributed. The sustainable farmers are growing wheat, they are growing potato, they are growing traditional crops. Along with, they are also growing other crops, which are mentioned in the last part. These other crops comprise pulses and exotic fruits and vegetables. So they are not dependent on any kind of minimum supportive price. However, they are achieving good revenue. If you look at this age group involved, this pie chart, which depicts the age group involved, you will find out that 20 to 30 age group, the farmers, the sustainable farmers which belong to the age group of 20 to 30 were 24%, and the farmers that belong to the age group of 30 to 40 were 36%. That means 60% of our total sample space belong to the 20 to 40 age group. It means the sustainable agriculture is popular amongst the youngsters. Our other key findings would be the impact of education. Young educated individuals see sustainable farming as a lucrative career option due to its profitable nature. Second, the use of HYV seeds. HYV refers to the high yield variety seeds. Sustainable farmers used premium HYV seeds to a much higher extent than conventional farmers. Third comes the yield. The yield in conventional farming was obviously much higher than that in sustainable farming. For example, per hectare of a land, a conventional farmer was able to produce 12 to 15 quintals of wheat. However, a sustainable farmer could manage only to produce 8 to 9 quintals of wheat. But the irony is the revenue which was generated by a sustainable farmer, a farmer practicing sustainable farming, was higher than the revenue generated by the conventional farmer. Next key finding of our research would be resource recovery. Sustainable farmers use post-harvest crop residue as manure. The resource recovery in case of sustainable farming was much higher than that in the case of conventional farming. Then comes the use of technology. Sustainable farmers used cutting-edge technology such as drip irrigation, hydroponics, and modern farming techniques. On the other hand, the use of technology was limited to the use of tractors and other basic machinery in case of conventional farmers. Last but not the least, the cost. The input cost for sustainable farming was quite higher than that for conventional farming. This I think is the main reason behind the reluctance of conventional farmers to switch to sustainable farming. Now, I would like to invite my co-author, Ms. Shraddha Thomar, to proceed with consumer behavior towards green organic practices. Thank you so much.
Discussing the consumer behavior towards organic products. So first, let us discuss what actually is consumer behavior. So consumer behavior is the process in which we evaluate the attitude of consumer when it comes to their needs and want, which result them in buying products. So why it is important in order to facilitate sustainable agriculture? It's because a proactive adoption of organic culture by consumers, it works as a driving force when it comes to increase in number of farmers switching to sustainable farming than to conventional farming. Also, in order to keep up with the dynamic environment, the surroundings around a customer, it keeps on changing, and that influence the taste and preferences of the consumer as well. So going through the rule of economics, the more there is the demand, the more there will be the supply. So this results in the importance of studying consumer behavior when it comes to facilitate sustainable agriculture as well. Here are numerous factors when it comes to affect the consumer behavior, and it induces them to switch to organic products rather than inorganic products. First is the knowledge. So the knowledge enables a consumer to differentiate between the components of inorganic and organic products. Health consciousness, especially after the post-COVID era, people are growing more and more conscious toward their health, and which also enables them to choose products which are not only good in taste, but also contain health benefits as well. Next is price. Applying every possible economic rule, it shows that a price is a very important variable when it comes to instigate the demand of a particular product. Next is availability. So the market like India, which works on the concept of what you see is what you get, availability of a product is very important when it comes to induce consumer towards a particular variety of product. Next is rising interest. So there is a rise of interest towards organic products, especially after the growing health consciousness towards it. Now we'll be discussing the statistics which is derived, and it was derived through after doing random sampling, which was done through organized questionnaire. So in order to focus on the concept of knowledge, we have asked the question that do you prefer organic products over inorganic products? The majority of the people answered it as yes, which shows that more and more people are willing to switch to organic products because they know about the beneficial results when they use organic products. They can possibly compare organic and inorganic products. Next is health consciousness. The question which was asked that what are the reasons behind your preferences towards organic products? So most of the people answer that they prefer organic products because they are pesticides free and they are enriched in nutrition, which shows that health consciousness works as a driving force when it comes to consumers switching towards organic products. Next, for price, there were two questions asked. First, what do you feel about the pricing of the organic products? So the majority of the people answered it as premium pricing, and it is true because when it comes to organic products, there is a huge input cost that is included. Also, the distribution of organic products is done in less volume, which increases the per volume price of the products. So, and the next question was, how much is your monthly expenditure when it comes to organic products? So we can see that astonishingly, majority of the people, they spend more than 1K when it comes to organic products. So it shows that even though the pricing of organic products is premium, still if the consumer develops interest into organic products, they tend to spend more and more on organic products. Next is availability. You have exhausted your time. Sure. Next is availability. So it's like, from where do you generally buy organic products? So majority of the people answer that as online platforms, supermarkets, but we can see that comparatively the products are less available in the shops and kirana stores, which shows that the organic products have not yet penetrated towards the local traditional market. Next is rising interest, or we have already discussed that this point that people are developing more and more interest towards organic products.
The key findings were discussed, like the consumer now prioritize food products which are not only good in taste, but also which consolidate multiple health benefits as well. And if the trust of the consumer towards organic farming is earned, then irrespective of the premium pricing of the products, consumers generally are willing to buy more and more organic products. Also, what works as a hindrance is the less availability of organic products in conventional stores. It results in the mistrust of the consumers. Concluding our presentation, we have discussed that farmers are reluctant towards switching to sustainable agriculture due to some possible factors like less availability of government subsidies, less availability of knowledge and awareness, and also higher input cost. Whereas when we come to consumers, even consumers are reluctant when it comes to switching to organic products due to following reason, like premium pricing of the organic products and also the less availability of the organic products in traditional market, which makes the products less accessible towards the lowest strata of the society. Whereas post-COVID, it gives us immense opportunities when it comes to organic market, because people are growing more and more health conscious and they are preferring organic products over inorganic ones. So this is the best time where we can switch to or emphasize on switching to sustainable agriculture rather than conventional agriculture. Thank you so much.
I request the chair, if they have any question, they may ask.
Yeah, sure. Prakhar, may I know your background if you don't mind?
Yes, sir, I'm currently pursuing BLLB and I'm in second.
I can't hear you.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
So I'm currently pursuing BLLB. I'm in second year from NMIMS Indore campus.
Okay. Why I am asking this question? Because I am from the agriculture background. I am highly confused after your presentation. Because first you have to define what you perceive from the term conventional farming and sustainable farming. Normally, the traditional farming or conventional farming are sustainable. But I can guess that what you are calling the conventional farming, it is not the conventional farming, rather it is the modern farming. The practices that is evolved after the Green Revolution. And mostly the current farming practices that we are following over large area of the country, mostly it is external input based farming, where farmer has to grow the high yielding varieties, have to supply the irrigation, pesticide and fertilizers, etc., etc., etc. And that you are calling as a conventional farming. But what we have read or what we are teaching to our students, that basically the traditional farming or conventional farming are those farming practices that is evolved over a very long period of time, and that is adopted by the large number of farmers. Okay, but what is the problem of the conventional farming is its productivity is low, but it is the sustainable. But what happened over a period of time when we introduced our Green Revolution, it was based on the external inputs and they are very costly. Farmer has to put extra money to procure everything, right from seed to fertilizer to pesticides, and even go for the number of irrigations. Okay, so that is the one issue. So that is, I feel there is some confusion with respect to the terms that you have used. Okay. Second aspect, what Shraddha has presented, that is the consumer behavior towards the organic products. Again, there are two aspects. The product that was produced by the traditional farmers, mostly it was an organic product. But only problem with that that it is not labeled or it is not certified. Whatever produce is sold now in the market, it must have a label claim or it must be certified one. And that has nothing to do with the sustainability. Mostly it is a commercial venture where large number of farmers or even many business houses are producing the organic produce. And that organic produce is many times costlier than the normal produce that we are getting in the normal market. Okay. And as you know, in our country, there is a large section of the consumer that can afford even pay higher prices to get the good quality products. So no doubt there is a scope for those organic products. Okay. Thank you so much. Mr. Kishore, if you have any question, you can ask.
See, in short, you want conventional farming to be converted to sustainable farming, and you have also said that consumer is really playing a big role in this transformation. So, what are the key issues, or where would you like us more? Your efforts, the conventional farming farmers, because that is really huge. That volume is really transport to the sustainable sector.
We are really sorry to interrupt you, sir, but you are not properly audible to us.
Sir, I believe your net is distracting.
Yes, we can switch over to next participant, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Presenting on biodiversity, concept, threat, and conservation, we have Dr. Nidhi Mittal. Dr. Nidhi? Dr. Nidhi?
Hello.
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
You are listening to me? Okay,
Yes,
okay. Just wait for a few seconds. Hello. Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm audible.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, okay. Sorry for the inconvenience. Umbrella term for the extent of the nature's variety or variation within the natural system, both in number and frequency. It is often understood in terms of the wide variety of plants, animals, and microorganisms, the genes they contain, and the ecosystem they form. The biodiversity we see today is the result of billions of years of evolution shaped by natural process and increasingly by the influence of humans. It forms the web of life which we are an integral part and upon which we so fully depend. Biodiversity also includes genetic differences within each species. For example, and another features of biodiversity is the variety of ecosystems, such as those that occur in desert, forest. So we can say that biodiversity considered at three major levels, that are genetic diversity, species diversity, and ecosystem diversity. There are lots of benefits from the biodiversity, like the utilitarian benefits, ecosystem services, ethical and moral benefits, and has aesthetic values, as human beings derive great enjoyment from natural environment. The loss of biodiversity and the related changes in the environment are now faster than ever in human history, and there is no sign of this process slowing down. Important direct drivers affecting biodiversity are habitat alteration, climate changes, invasive species, overexploitation, and pollution. Now, what is the concept of biodiversity conservation? It is about saving life on Earth in all its forms and keeping natural ecosystems functioning and healthy. So we conserve biodiversity as it is a life supporting system of our planet. We depend on it for the air we breathe, the food we eat, and the water we drink. Consuming biodiversity is not an issue confined to any country or community. It is a crucial global concern. Conservation of biological diversity and sustainable use of its components came into the limelight in 1972 in Stockholm. In 1973, UNEP identified conservation of biodiversity as priority area. Hence, there was need to get the legal mandate for conservation of world resources. There were negotiations for a legally binding instrument to address biological diversity and its losses to enhance fairness and the equity in sharing of the benefits of biodiversity. This led to the opening of the Convention on Biological Diversity in 1992. The convention was inspired by growing concern all over the world for sustainable development and the objectives of convention were conservation of the biological diversity, sustainable use of its components, and a fair and equitable sharing of all its benefits. Indian is also taking efforts for biodiversity conservation. In India, protecting and promoting biodiversity has always been an integral part of culture and civilization. India is one of the early signatories to the UN Convention on Biological Diversity. Even prior to CBD, India has already been having legal provisions dealing with the aspects relating to biodiversity. Now, I am concluding my paper by suggesting some strategy goals for biodiversity conservation. First one is addresses the underlying causes of biodiversity loss by mainstreaming biodiversity across government and society. Second one is reduce the direct pressures on the biodiversity and promote sustainable use. Third, improve the status of biodiversity by safeguarding ecosystem, species, and genetic diversity. And next one is enhance the benefits to all from biodiversity and ecosystem services. Last one is enhance implementation through participatory building. A heartfelt thanks to DME.
I request the chair if they have any question, they may ask.
I have no question from my side. Mr. Kishore, if you have any question, you may ask.
Yeah. See, means I really appreciate your presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Can you please tell us a little bit more about the because the last four points that you said, they are very important. See, today we have already underlined the importance of herbal medicines in India, and people or there are some agencies which are in its trade, but the very business has put lot of pressure on our biological resources which are lying in our forest or around tribal villages or around rural villages, and these biological resources, they come illegally in the market. So how can we address this issue? Because one hand, we want herbal medicines and make it available to the patients, but same time we want them to be protected into the areas where these resources are. So how are you going to address this issue?
Sir, in only one line, I can say if we more hard work on these issues like the herbal medicines and conserve our other natural services, natural system, and more other procedure for the natural disasters, take the precaution, and governments also must more take initiative for all this. So there is, I think, some technical issue.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, sir, my pleasure.
Thank you, Dr. Kishore.
Okay.
Stuti,
Thank you, ma'am.
can we move to the next
Yes.
speaker?
Yeah.
Next, we have Mr. A. Muhammad Ali presenting on a critical study on the role of NGOs and other regional arrangements in the protection of marine ecosystem. Mr. Muhammad. I believe he is not in the meeting. So shall we move on to the next one? Presenting on nuclear accidents, ecological impact, and legal protocol, we have Mr. Ishan Nakra.
Good
Mr.
afternoon.
Ishan.
Me 2 minutes. I'll just set it up.
Yes, sure.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ishan Nakra. I'm a student at Campus Law Center, Faculty of Law, University of Delhi. And the topic of my paper is nuclear accidents, ecological impact, and legal protocol under the theme of environmental damages during warfare and nuclear launches. So just to answer the first question, the what this paper really is about. I will be dealing with 5 of the most major nuclear accidents or disasters that have occurred in the world. The Kishtim nuclear disaster in Russia in 1957, the Windscale fire nuclear disaster in United Kingdom, again, 1957, clearly not one of the best years for nuclear safety. And the 3 Mile Island nuclear accident in USA in 1979, Chernobyl in Ukraine, 1986, and a very recent one, Fukushima nuclear disaster in Japan, 2011. And in each of these, I will be talking about the facts, the casualties that occurred, the ecological impact, and the immediate legal and political reaction, as well as the social reaction to the disaster or the accident, and the long-term response and resolutions and projects undertaken by the government, and perhaps most importantly, the lessons worth learning from each of these disasters and all of them combined to minimize the kind of damage that occurs. Which brings me to the second point, why? Why is this topic of relevance for discussion? Well, nuclear energy is important for defense strategy. It is the epicenter of the defense policy ever since a few years before the end of the World War II, whether it was the Oppenheim or the Manhattan Project in USA or the current projects going on in India, Pakistan, and 7 other countries in the world that currently have nuclear power. And geopolitical relations, whether it's the Non-Proliferation Treaty or the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. There are many declarations and organizations on an international level dedicated to regulating relations, imposing sanctions, and prohibiting the use of nuclear energy, or at least regulating it to whatever extent possible. And third, we come to its relevance in the energy crisis, because there is an obvious shortage of fossil fuels, and the kind of damage that the fossil fuels also cause to the environment is immense. And nuclear energy, along with solar, hydroelectric, and wind power energy, has emerged as a very usable form of energy that is indeed very powerful. In fact, UK's development in nuclear energy is quite commendable. But apart from this, the dangers of nuclear war or disaster is the end of the world and environmental damage. And since this is an international deliberation on environmental topics and sustainable development, I will be dealing with the latter in this paper, which is environmental damage. So the first, the Kishtim nuclear disaster in Russia. Just a few pointers. It occurred in the Chelyabinsk district on 29 September 1957. There were evacuations and resettlements of only a few of the most affected villages. And then they were found that East Ural's radioactive trace, a map of which you will be seeing on the next slide. News of this accident was kept under wraps by the Soviet government for over 30 years, which is what makes this particular disaster so surprising. There was an increased incidence of bronchitis, pharyngitis, and pyoderma, amongst other diseases. There was massive agricultural soil contamination that was unseen for over and unfound for over years before they could actually see the effects and the cancer incidence amongst the population that was consuming the produce from the contaminated agricultural soil. And as mentioned before, the news of this accident was kept under wraps for over 30 years. It was only when an informant by the name of Zerev Medvedev wrote a book and took out some papers that it finally came to international limelight. Just a few pictures. This is the sign that warns of radioactivity in the area, a memorial for those who died fighting the fires or in the disaster, a picture of the power plant at Kishtim, and a photo of the river Tercha, which is supposed to be one of the most contaminated rivers in the world and not just in the area due to the radionuclides present. Then we come to the EURT, which is the East Ural's radioactive trace. The dark red is the most contaminated or the most radioactive area, while the lighter red areas are the ones with lesser radioactivity. As you can see, the place next to the Mayak Production Association, which is just another name for the power plant, is deep red. And in this area is Lake Karachi, which is the most contaminated lake in the world. It is said, and that's a picture of Lake Karachi, it is said that the contamination levels are so high that a person standing on the shore of this lake for merely an hour can die due to lethal radioactive exposure. And that is the dumping of radioactive waste in the lake. Next, we come to the Windscale fire, the nuclear disaster in the United Kingdom. The nuclear reactor containing uranium burst due to excess heat, and the temperatures reached massive heights. It was 1300 degrees Celsius, and it was the worst disaster in Britain's history. Harmful nuclides was dispersed, and the full report again was not publicly released until 30 years later, similar to Kishtim. Hunter Davies wrote a book called Sellafield Stories that was very important because not only was it the largest oral history project ever conducted in Britain, but it also reported the stories of the factory workers in Sellafield, which was a nearby town you'll be seeing on the map in the next slide. on the nearby town, and they talked about the kind of damage that happened during and after the disaster, and the kind of ignorance and apathy of the government and its effects on their day-to-day lives. Several children died from leukemia, the waste was dumped in lakes, national parks were made storehouses, and rare strains of cancer began to appear. And again, like in the case of Kishtim, food sources were contaminated due to contamination of agricultural soil, and people were kept in the dark about the possible dangers, as information asymmetry was largely prevalent, just as in the previous case. This is a picture of the power plant. This is a picture of a warning about contaminated personnel. And this is a map that shows the proximity of the Sellafield town to Windscale. A lot of the people in Sellafield were factory workers or people who worked within the nuclear power plant. And this is a photo of the book written by Hunter Davies called Sellafield Stories. Next, we come to the 3 Mile Island nuclear accident. This is an accident that was much more different from the ones that we've seen before, because in the span of more than 20 years, there was a much more mature reaction, or a much better reaction of the US government to this disaster, even though it is said in retrospect that the levels of the disasters were the same. In this case, the nuclear reactor was located in Pennsylvania. The water pumps there was a malfunction. They say it was due to human error. And the technicians worked tirelessly for over 5 days to fight the fire and bring back the cooling system while the plant was in crisis. But no deaths were caused, and also no evidence linking cancer incidents or any major environmental effect. What is actually laudable is the fact that Jimmy Carter, the then president, appointed a commission within 2 weeks to provide a report of the accident and also give suggestions. The cleanup plan was developed and carried out for 14 years, and the cost ran up to $1 billion. This is the picture of the United States Nuclear Regulatory Commission, which played a very important role in suggesting precautions to be taken, not only for the future, the 3 Mile Island nuclear power plant, but also other power plants in the US. This is a series of protests because, unlike the other cases, the public was quite aware of the kind of dangers that would occur. This is the picture of the people cleaning up the area. Again, another picture of the 3 Mile power plant, and another picture of people cleaning up the area. Then we come to perhaps the most infamous of all. No list of nuclear disasters is complete without mentioning the Chernobyl nuclear disaster in 1986. It was set up between the cities of Pripyat and Kiev. The accident occurred in 1986, and they were trying to run an experiment on seeing if it could be properly shut down when the cooling system was off. However, they underestimated the kind of heat, the rate at which the reactors would heat up. And there was no time to properly turn on the cooling system. It was too late, and the reactor number 4 heated up too rapidly. There were several fires. The immediate death toll itself was 29, and more than 500,000 soldiers were sent to clean up the area. These were known as the liquidators. 45% of these died, while 50% remained disabled. After studies were conducted, these are the figures that have come around. As many as 300 animals with deformities have seen, and the forests of pine needles have also seen mutations of the color of rust, gaining the infamous name of the red forest.
Mr. Hassan, it will be better if you focus on the a second part of your paper, because you have taken more than 8 minutes.
All right, sir. These are just a few pictures to see a memorial, the poster of Chernobyl. This is the area, and this is the mutation of the forests, the red forests. Then we come to the Fukushima. This was caused due to an earthquake. Evacuations were very quick. However, there were no deaths caused, only injuries due to evacuation. And the cleanup cost, as recorded in the last point of the slide, was $201 billion estimated. It's still ongoing, and they say it will take up to 2051. Now, these are a few pictures. Next, we come to the more important part, as I said, the conclusion. What are the lessons that we draw from something like this? All of the accidents were caused by a malfunction of the cooling system, which means that we need constant surveillance. We need to regularly assess equipment and quality, and have a reserve on-site team and backup power supply, and carefully supervise the tests that we run, and not just run them without careful interpretation of the results. Then we need to have a safe radioactive disposal system. The contamination at Tercha, or whether it was the Lake of Death, also known in the Kishtim case, or whether it was the Chernobyl area, there is a need of a safe radioactive disposal system and a well-circulated evacuation plan that the residents in the nearby towns and cities are aware of, and regular evacuation drills must also be run, and a well-equipped contingency crew should be there on standby to prevent delay. Intermittent studies on radiation levels, as in the case of the 3 Mile nuclear accident and Fukushima, are something to learn from, because there were a lot of studies that were conducted, and that is very helpful to understand the kind of contamination or the level of contamination in the soil, the kind of cancer incidence in the people, and how to best tackle the same. Independent investigation bodies, as in the case of the 3 Mile nuclear accident and Fukushima, are again very important. And by the time that the Fukushima incident occurred, international cooperation was very high, because the IAEA helped with their conducting an action plan and a report, and that was helpful in understanding the kind of precautions that need to be taken. However, this information is not useful if it is not publicly accessible, which brings me to my next point, and the regulation, safety measures, and studies should be made available. Thank you so much.
Mr. Hassan, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Ishan. Yes, sir.
I have one query. In the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict, is there any probability of nuclear radiation from the Chernobyl?
So, sir, in this particular conflict, in the most recent development, Russia took away some samples. And these samples weren't very old. They were more from more recent tests of the soil and the water. There is, at least according to me, no threat of the Chernobyl area contaminating what it is more than what is already contaminated. The nearby areas like Pripyat are almost completely deserted, and the samples are unlikely to be used by Russia in a way that would, say, contaminate the river. I think that the reason that Russia, say, does things like prepping up its nuclear weapons, or does things like seizing the laboratory samples that contain active radioactive nuclides, is to threaten and inspire fear in the people of Ukraine and the rest of the world. But I think it is merely a deterrent, or merely a tactic to inspire fear, because the moment that Russia does it, it brings itself to a lot of not only just international condemnation, which is going on right now, but it essentially declares nuclear chemical war.
Thank you. Is there any question from anybody? Mr. Kishore?
Ishan, there is a huge risk and dangers involved in energy. Countries are going ahead with this option for some obvious reason, because they really produce a very large amount of energy compared to thermal and hydel and renewable energy sources. So that's why these countries are going ahead with that. I want you to think about India, and especially in the climate change context, we cannot rely upon thermal power, because it leads to disastrous situation as far as climate change is concerned. So, do you have any idea about installed capacity of India, and how can we switch over from the thermal power to renewable energy sources like solar and wind and hydel? Do you have any idea?
So as you mentioned, that even though nuclear energy has a lot of output in terms of the kind of gigawatts that it's able to give, it is much more than wind or thermal or hydroelectric even. But I don't think it's an option for India that India should explore wholeheartedly. It does have nuclear power plants for energy in, I believe, areas in Rajasthan. But expanding its nuclear energy program will be a little dangerous at this stage, because we do not have a very proper system, or we don't have the kind of space, the land, the kind of disposal system, or the channels for communicating in any kind of emergency, for example, or evacuation drills. And expanding it on a large scale would be therefore dangerous. But in terms of the other energies that you mentioned, I think there are better sources of energy, for example, solar. India has not yet tapped its full potential of solar energy. It is a tropical country. The kind of sunlight that we see here is almost unparalleled, apart from just a few African countries and other tropical countries. And the kind of technology running on solar energy, be it buildings or be it electricity supplies, are not very much. And I believe government subsidized projects or contracts or private public partnerships, PP partnerships, could really help realize the full potential. I think hydroelectric power is something that India is doing particularly well in, because it has installed so many dams across the country, and even has a major partnership going on with other countries like Bhutan and Nepal.
Okay. Thank you, Ishan.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Sir, we can switch over to next participant.
Presenting on environment preservation, saving present to surviving future, Ms. Hani Shah and Ms. Nabila Qureshi is here.
Are we audible and visible both?
Yes, ma'am.
So, a very good afternoon to one and all present here. I, Hanisha, along with my co-author, Ms. Nabila Qureshi, are very grateful to have this opportunity to present this paper. And we have already discussed a lot of problems and all the causes of how we are having disrupting environmental resources. And we have already heard a lot of people. But then here we are going to discuss about what we can do and what has already been done by that one of the renowned entity of India, that is Tata, the Tata group of companies. And so I'll be sharing the screen. Please let me know if it is visible to you.
No.
Is it visible?
No.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Okay. So the paper describes about the proactive initiative planned and implemented by the Tata Group. Here, before discussing the case study, we should know how and what an individual can also do. So, just a minute. Yeah. So talking about the current era of globalization and liberalization, despite rising awareness of environmental destructions, the resources have been recklessly used. So we already know how the resources are being used and how corporates, or maybe being an individual, we are disrupting environment in a lot of ways. So the firm using these natural resources in order to have more productivity have to realize and take the active steps for preservation of environment. It is with the backdrop, the present paper discusses the case study of Tata Group of Companies, which is a dynamic business enterprise in Indian economy. Talking about the steps taken by Tata, so we have to discuss about what are they implementing. So these are the two primary ways in which environmental sustainability can be achieved: by individual, by corporation, and by government bodies. So here, as individuals, we can take small effective steps towards a more sustainable lifestyle, like using less water, reducing our meat consumption, and switching to reusable products to reduce our dependence on single-use plastics. And from corporations' perspective, environmental sustainability may involve switching to renewable energy in warehouses, factories, and offices, or cutting down on single uses of plastics in manufacturing. It is about creating an equilibrium between consumerist human culture and the living world. We want a lot of energy and materials than ever before, because we are increasing even as a population size, and even our consumption is increasing. So despite this, our planet will solely give such a lot of resources before they start to use up. For this reason, businesses should step up in and do their half. Talking about the approach used by Tata. So Tatas have wholesomely followed triple bottom line approach, where they have looked after profit, which benefits people and planet. So according to the triple bottom line approach, this theory, companies should work simultaneously on three bottom lines, that is profit, people, and planet. Talking about profit, we all know what is P&L accounts. About people, this measures how socially responsible an organization has been throughout its history. Talking about the corporate social responsibilities. And talking about planet, this measures how environmentally responsible a firm has been. So in economics, the TBL maintains that companies should commit to focusing as much as social and environmental concerns as do on profit. TBL theory posits that instead of one bottom line, there should be three, that is profit, people, and planet. And a TBL seeks to gauge a corporation's level of commitment to corporate social responsibility and its impact on environment over time. We'll see what are the steps taken by Tata in their corporate social responsibilities. So they have 4 sectors. In the community, they have health, education, empowerment, and environment. We'll directly jump to environment because we are talking about sustainable environment. The Tata group of companies are strongly driven by international benchmarks for sustainable practices in business. From this flows its support for endeavors to conserve plant and animal species, improve land and water use, and protect forest tracts and green sanctuaries. The group's contribution to conservation falls into 2 categories. Those are efforts of different Tata groups, big and small, to preserve and enrich the environment in and around their areas of operation. So wherever they are having operating plants, they are having one or the other initiatives to maintain, to sustain, and to preserve their environmental resources, whichever they are using. And then philanthropic thrust of the Tata Trust, which supports a diverse cluster of non-governmental organizations working in areas such as management of natural resources, community development, and livelihood. So these are the initiatives taken by Tata for environment conservation, sustainability, and preservation. So the first one is the Tata Group's Reef Recharge project. The Tata Group's Reef Recharge project began in 2011 as a joint effort by Taj Exotics Resort and Spa and Ocean Dive Maldives to increase coral coverage near the resort and encourage healthy coral growth on the local reefs. The area has already seen an increase in fauna diversity levels. So they have resort spa, and in and around they have coral reef on which they are already working. So it is known as Reef Recharge project. Second one is from Tata Chemicals Botanical Reserve. It is by Tata Chemicals Limited, one of the son of Tata Group. So they are working on several projects, that is regeneration of mangroves, waterfall conservation of Charakla saltworks. Third is Prakriti Eco Club programs. Fourth is biodiversity plantation project. Fifth is Save the Asiatic Lion project. Fourth, another one is Mithapur Coral Reef Restoration project, and the last one is Save the Whale Shark project. In all of the projects, the first one, regeneration of mangroves, they have more than 150 acres of mangrove plantation that has been done at different locations of Okha Mandal. And the aims at restoring the original mangrove cover, which help improve coastal ecology and provide the much needed roosting and nesting sites for aquatic birds. Talking about waterfall conservation at Charakla Salt Works, the Charakla Salt Works, which is owned and operated by TCL, provides refuge to a large population of aquatic birds, both migratory and native. So they have certain nesting sites of Caspian terns, also known as Terna caspia, in the country. And these birds have been nesting regularly for more than 2 decades now. So considering the importance of Charakla salt works for the chemical industry, they have conservation project for providing safe nesting habitats for the terns and other waterfowl has been taken up. The purpose is to ensure the salt manufacturing and waterfowl conservation processes continue in a symbiotic manner. So they are going hand in hand with the productivity as well as the preservation. The waterfowl conservation project at Charakla Saltwork has ensured an uninterrupted breeding cycle for Caspian terns at it, and it is also only known active nesting site in the country.
The third one, Prakruti Eco Club program. So this Eco Club program is an integrated initiative by TCL, that is the Tata Chemical Limited, to create conservation awareness and encourage participatory approach between the corporate, community, and other stakeholders for the conservation of local biodiversity. The fourth one is Biodiversity Plantation Project. So they have an attempt for the conservation of local strain of native flora, especially threatened species, through the creation of 150-acre botanical reserve at Mithapur. The another one is Save the Asiatic Lion Project. So there was this issue with the Gir National Park and Wildlife Sanctuary, wherein they had 15,000 open wells. And a major threat to the estimated 412 lions found in the Gir region. And there were incidents of the endangered lions and other wildlife perishing due to falling into this open wells. So here the TCL, in partnership with the Gujarat State Forest Department, undertook the job of building parapet walls around 1,000 wells to render them safe. Since then, work has already been completed and a total of 1,204 open wells have been rendered safe. So the Save of Asiatic Lion project has helped mitigate mortality risk for lions and other wildlife in and around the Gir forest. The another one is Mithapur Coral Reef Restoration Project. Here, coral reefs are highly productive marine habitats known as the rainforest of the sea. So the aim of the Mithapur Coral Reef Restoration Project is to strengthen the marine ecosystem. The Mithapur Coral Reef Restoration Project has helped in design and testing of long-distance coral transportation and transplantation protocols, which will now provide a basis to a global scientific community involved in the conservation of corals. The last one, that is Save the Whale Shark Project. The whale shark is the largest fish in the world and was once slaughtered along the Gujarat coast in large numbers for its oil and meat. This led to a steep decline in its population, and hence it was declared endangered species in 2001. The Save the Whale Shark campaign was launched in 2004 with an aim to create conservation awareness amongst the coastal communities and garner their support for protecting the endangered fish. And the Save Whale Shark project has been a big success with the state forest. The program has till date helped rescue 585 whale sharks, which makes it one of the biggest achievements in the rescue and release of endangered fish worldwide. So, along with the Forest Department institutionalizing the Whale Shark Day program and granting of monetary relief to fishermen who have incurred fishing net damages during whale shark rescue operation, was the project undertaken by TCL. Another initiative taken by Tata Motors, that is Wetland Habitat. They have 3 different initiatives, that is Gardens for Green. Inside its 1,160 acre plant in the highly urbanized Pimpri-Chinchwad industrial belt in Pune, Tata Motors has transformed a scrubby barren area into a natural wetland habitat that covers 243 acres. This green oasis in the middle of the city serves as natural oxygen generator and a safe haven for migratory birds. Another is a hug spot.
Please conclude. Your time is over, so please conclude.
Yeah, so for all the initiatives taken by Tatas, they have already been very carefully identifying the necessities of the area where species have been on the verge of extinction. Steps are taken to preserve aquatic species, to conserve Asiatic lion, and to make a club of people to help them contribute to reach out to the places where organizations cannot. This helps organization reach its goal for a sustainable environment. They have already been tied up with certain sustainable development goals, and they have a lot of initiatives activities of Tata are promoting a lot of education, health, environmental conservation and preservation activities. So herein I just want to conclude in a one statement that triple bottom line approach is not really taken seriously by all the organizations, but when an organization like Tata is working in all the aspects, we can spread
board, or we can actually think of taking triple bottom line approach really seriously, and we can actually work on environmental part, on preservation, sustainability, and taking upon the species that are on the world seriously. Thank you.
Thank you, Hani, for your nice presentation. And at the outset, you have very rightly categorized the efforts is to be at the individual level as well as at the societal level. I have only one query from you, that we all know that Tata Group is doing very good work in this field, but why other corporates are not following the Tata good work? Is there any way that it can be motivate the others to follow the Tata?
Sure, sir, we can definitely do that. But then the thing that I have observed, being with Tata for a while, not really in a professional way, but then in a CSR projects, I have seen how they have identified the very sensitive parts from their work area. Not every organization does this. They are doing CSR, but for the sake of a protocol and not for the sake of ethics. So this is the difference between Tata and other organizations, wherein ethics is playing a major role.
Sir, I just wanted to add on with this that, it can be lined up with the organization culture. So organization culture should be such that, that should emphasize on the environmental sustainability product. So, I mean, that has to be done from the organization culture point of view.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Mr. Kishore.
Yeah, Hani, thank you for listing all the activities that Tata Group of companies have adopted. In fact, we don't have much time for the question, but as I have come across with the Dhamra port, where the port was coming on the turtle breeding ground, and their Tata companies have taken a position that they would go ahead with the mitigation measures, but they can't change the site. And so my submission is mitigation measures is not the only solution. In some cases, avoidance is the best mitigation somewhere. So Tata Group of companies should definitely think about this aspect also. You cannot just destroy the habitat and then we'll say that we would take the mitigation measures. So mitigation measures are not enough when you destroy that particular habitat. So you told all the good things. I really appreciate them, and rest of the companies also should come forward for adopting these kind of measures. But mitigation measures are not enough. That's what I want to emphasize. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. All the participants are requested to stick to their time limit, that is 10 minutes. Moving on to our next presentation, we have Ms. Vidya Devan presenting on poaching challenges and solutions in preserving the wildlife with special reference to India.
Good afternoon, one and all. Let me share my screen. Respected Chair, other dignitaries, and my co-presenters. Today, my title of the topic is Poaching Challenges and Solutions in Preserving the Wildlife with Special Reference to India. And this topic, I'm analyzing the causes of the wildlife crime and the consequences and imperatives, and suggesting some imperative solutions to prevent this wildlife crime. Is this screen audible, visible?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay. Transforming the world to a prosperous, peaceful destination can be achieved only by addressing the crime against the wildlife. United Nations highlighted the need for protection of wildlife by incorporating this as a core point on the 15th agenda among the 17 agendas drawn out for the achieving the Sustainable Development 2030. Poaching, what is poaching? Poaching is resorted to for food, pleasure, illegal trade, or wildlife protection, acquire the land for use, and aspiration for valuable and rare animal products such as ivory, bones, fur, skin, or teeth, and medicinal purposes, etc. The impacts of poaching are varied. The devastating consequences of poaching are extinction, suffering of the animals, imbalance of the ecosystem, destruction of the environment, etc. It has also become a grave transnational menace to the stability, security, and economy of the entire nations. Coming to the history, the wildlife was poached from the olden days. In ancient period, the animals were hunted for food, but it doesn't cause much destruction to the ecosystem. Later, the Egyptians used the ivory in their jewelry, and from 3500 BC to 3000 BCE. After 700 BCE, it became common in the Greek and Roman Empire to capture and tame the keeping the variety of exotic mammals and reptiles in the household. The modern period witnessed the extensive trade in the live exotic animals. Last 50 years, that is from 1970 to 2020, witnessed a decline of 60% of the population. And realizing the importance of wildlife, there were many attempts from international attempts to preserve the wildlife. Some of them are International Union for Conservation of Nature in 1963 and decided to take measures to protect the wildlife. The Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora in an agreement was entered in 1973. International Consortium on Combating Wildlife Crime, which is a collaborative effort of the 5 international intergovernmental organization, was launched on November 23rd, 2010. And the latest is the 2030 Agenda for the Sustainable Development, adopted in September 2015 by the United Nations Sustainable Development Summit, highlighted the need for the protection of wild fauna and flora and the ecosystem upon which they depend. Among the 17 sustainable goals, SDGs, emphasis has been given to the protection of wildlife and adopted life on land as goal 15. And coming to the causes of poaching, what are the causes of poaching? The poaching or wildlife crime is resorted to food, medicinal use, health, cosmetics, fragrances, jewelry, accessories, curious collections, and other attractions. It's also resorted to as part of the religious and cultural traditions. So what are the important causes? First one is inadequate law enforcement. India has enacted the Wildlife Protection Act in 1972 itself. Being the signatory of international agreement, India is taking measures in accordance with the guidelines prescribed by them. But we are not able to effectively address the problem of poaching due to the regulations that can be easily circumvented. And many government officials are direct beneficiaries from the profits of poaching. Many receive bribes from the poachers and aid them in the illegal wild trafficking. With the help of the corrupt forest officials, the hunting became more easier for the invaders. The lack of stringent rules and minor punishment, which is not sufficient to deter them, is a reason that these activities cannot be controlled. The second cause is high demand for the wildlife and forest products. Illegal wild trafficking is the most profitable business in the world as a whole. The United Nations assesses that the profit from the illegal wildlife trade in the world is between $7 billion and $23 billion a year. It is one of the most profitable criminal enterprise in the world. And the third reason is that it is used for the religious and cultural tradition. Some animals are the part of various traditional cultures are all around the world. Animals are hunted and slaughtered as part of religious rituals. Leopard skin, horse feathers, tail, skin, fur, teeth, horns, heads, ivory, etc. are used as ceremonial objects for the religious rituals. And the fourth one is it is used for the medicinal purposes. The rhino's horn possesses it is believed that the rhino's horn possesses medicinal values. In China, turtles, snakes, orangutans, etc. are used in traditional medicine to cure numerous diseases like cancer. And they have believed that these animal products are having healing powers also. And the fifth one is the food and exotic dishes. It is used. Human beings depend upon the wildlife for food from the primitive time. When the population was limited and the man hunted barely for food, it did not cause much destruction to the wildlife. But But in the modern period, with much sophisticated weapons, man hunted extensively for food, that too for various cuisines. And the sixth one is that as sports, it is many animals are poached for the sports and recreation. Also, these animals have to suffer injuries and end up in a painful death. And the seventh cause is that expansion of human settlement. As population exploded, the man started encroaching to the forest area for domicile and cultivation, affecting the natural habitat of wildlife. This often resulted in the wild animal and human conflicts. And the eighth point is the organized criminal network. As illegal activities expanded, the wildlife crime also extended. The trade of wildlife products became more structured. Subnational, national, and international trade flourished well, as this was the business which gave a huge profit. The drug cultivation and trafficking also caused much damage to the wildlife. And now, what are the causes of consequences of poaching? The main consequences are it leads to the destruction of the biodiversity and ecosystem of the world, which is becoming a threat to the existence of the earth itself. Along with the extinction of many charismatic wildlife species like elephant, tigers, rhinos, leopards, thousands of lesser known endangered species are also being driven to the extinction by poaching. Many animals poached for their body parts and driven into painful death. The poachers shoot the animals, and many often they take the valuable body parts even when they are alive and leave them to the painful end. Many officials and rangers are also killed by the poachers who hinders the hunting. The organized criminal networks which flourish along the poaching, like illegal trafficking, drug trafficking, etc., is becoming a threat to the human life. Poaching is also now becoming a reason for the spread of infectious and deadly diseases, and from the animals to the human beings. Imbalance in the ecosystem, it is also causing imbalance in the ecosystem. The nature is built as there should be predator and prey, and many species being poached is disrupting the food chain, which is threat to the existence of the man and the earth. So these are the reasons, causes, and consequences. And now the issue is how we will tackle the poaching. So we can tackle the poaching only by a collaborative or cooperative efforts. That is, the first measure is that we have to assess the challenges. What are the challenges faced by each area has to be assessed first, like what is the hindrance in preventing the wildlife crime, whether it is lack of proper law, whether the enforcement machinery is inefficient, whether it is there any deficiency in the information circulating machinery, are the officials equipped to deal with the poachers who are using the modern weapons, is the government able to give protection to the officers working in the forest against the poachers. And so we have to analyze all these things, and you have to take the necessary measures according to these deficiencies. And then the next is the proper legislation. There should be proper legislation to address the poaching. There are legislation for all the countries has adopted legislation, but this alarming rate shows that it has to be modified, or it is not sufficient to prevent the poaching. The enforcement mechanism also has to be modified, and efficient officials has to be appointed. And the third one is ensure effective prosecution. Cases filed against the poachers are always lack the proper evidence. As the cases are not strongly built up during the trial by the prosecution, many of the accused find it easy to get acquitted. This encourages the poachers to continue their activities, so the approach of the prosecution has to be improved. And the next one is to provide training to the rangers or the officials. All officials are not corrupt or bribe-seeking persons. Several times they are not able to tackle the highly trained poachers who uses highly modernized weapons. Training should be provided to the forest officials and the rangers, which equip them to improve their effectiveness. And another important step is to involve the public and encourage the collaborative efforts. The community residing nearby the forest can play a vital role in preventing the poaching. The small groups, including the ordinary people, may be created. They can very well give the information regarding the invasion of poachers in the forest. And the next important preventive measure which can take is use more sophisticated techniques. Undetectable harmless trackers need to be installed to track the wildlife. This enables officials to have an accurate data on the number of animals in their location from the control room itself. Cameras may also be fixed in the areas where the endangered species are all cohabiting. So these are the measures which we can take, and the next is the create sanctuaries for the animals. Sanctuaries can alone preserve the animals who are at the verge of extinction. Sanctuaries provide comfortable living habit to the animals free from the external disturbances. So by these measures, we can prevent the poaching to an extent. And lastly, I'm just dealing with the measures which has taken by India for the protection of wildlife. In India, animal protection was given much importance from the ancient period itself, that is Kautilya and Arthashastra prescribes how a ruler has to protect the forest and wildlife. And from the 19th century, legislative protections was enacted. These are the some in the Ray, that is Statute for Protection of Elephants in 1873 in Madras, Elephant Preservation Act in 1879, the Wild Birds Protection Act 1887, the Wild Birds Animal Protection Act 1912 and amended in 1935. Article 48A of the Constitution of India made it duty of the state to protect the wildlife, Wildlife Protection Act 1972. And coming to the conclusion, Article 51AG of the Constitution of India makes it a fundamental duty of the citizen to protect the wildlife. Along with the stringent laws and the proper law enforcing machinery, the efforts of which each member of the community can better preserve our wildlife for the better future. Thank you.
Hello. So you explained about the problems as well as solutions. Now you tell me, we blame China and South Korea and Thailand for trading our wild animals and wildlife derivatives, but we have some northeastern states where there are still wet markets where all these wild animals are you get dead and alive for sale. How are you going to stop it? What kind of recommendation you would like to give to Indian government?
We have to take two measures. That is, from the government itself, we have to prohibit such activities, and another one is giving awareness to the people that there is two areas. That one side is that the people who are buying that are not aware that they are doing a crime, and also the people who are selling. Some of the people, they are not aware of that. So first, one measure is we have to give awareness to the people who are conducting the business and people who are purchasing, and another stringent measure is to come from the government itself to prohibit such kind of activities.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Vidya.
Yes, sir.
I have one query from you, that there are different myths about the use of the body parts of the deer and tigers, and there are so many wild animals for bigger and vitality. Okay, so how much they contribute in the poaching of the wild animals? So what is the role of these myths, or their contribution in the poaching of the wild animals, and how it can be avoided?
Excuse me, sir, I didn't get what is the role of
myths. There are many misconceptions that use of some body parts will help you in treating some disorder or growth and vitality bigger, etc., etc., etc.
Yes, that is blood of turtle is used for creating sexual urges, etc. There are many misconceptions that can be cured only by the awareness programs. In that also, that we cannot say that the awareness should be given by the NGOs or etc. The government should take initiative, and they have to form the schemes. If we have to attain the goal 15, we have to reach to the sustainable development to 2030. We have to take, the government has to take the measures. I have mentioned all the steps. In all of this, the government have to take the initiative. Then only it can be properly implemented. Awareness has to be given. This can be given cured only by the awareness, I think.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir. Moving on to our next presenter, we have Dr. Jagdish Chandra presenting on a socio-legal analysis of impact of climate change on right to livelihood of farmers in Kutch region of Gujarat, India.
Thank you, Ms. Stuti. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so this is not Dr. Jagdish Chandra who is going to present. I'll be presenting on behalf of him today. Sir is actually struck with some interview. He's the registrar of Gujarat National Law University. So, like, I'll present on behalf of him. I'm the co-author of the paper. So, with the permission of the chair, can I just share my?
Sure. You are most welcome.
Yes, sir. I hope the PPT is visible.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'll also request one more thing. Actually, we are facing little connectivity issue in our university. If you can permit me to allow me to keep my video file in the presentation.
Yeah, sure. No problem.
Okay. Thank you, sir. So, like a warm good afternoon to the honorable panelists and the organizers and all the participants. At the outset, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the organizers for giving me this opportunity to present our study here. And as I said, the author of this paper is Dr. Jagdish Chandra, who is an assistant professor and registrar of Gujarat National Law University, and the co-author is myself. I'm working as assistant professor research with Gujarat National Law University. So as you can see, the title of our paper is a socio-legal analysis of impact of climate change on right to livelihood of farmers living in the Kutch region of Gujarat. So this paper is based on an empirical research that we have done during January to March 2021, and this was a project which has already been funded by the government of Gujarat. So before getting into the findings, and I'll just highlight the significance of the study. So agriculture, as already many of the presenters have highlighted the importance of agriculture. So agriculture is crucial for ensuring food security, nutrition and livelihood of major percentage of the population in India. So when Sustainable Development Goals are targeting to end hunger and achieve food security and improve nutrition, for India, food security continues to be a challenge. The growing population of India is demanding more agricultural production, but many factors along with the climate change has become a threat to the agricultural production of the nation. The green gas effect, rising atmospheric temperature, sea level rise, shift in monsoon, increased cyclone, flood, etc. are impacting the agricultural production. Another fact is that in India, 60% of the agricultural lands are rain-fed, and shift in monsoon is impacting the production to a larger extent. Likewise, one of the major threats the coastal regions agriculture sector is facing is the rising sea level, and the due to which there is salinity in this. So sea levels in the coastline of India are rising at a much faster rate, endangering the ports, increasing the chances of coastal flooding in low-lying areas, and impacting the livelihood of millions of people who live near the seashore and the river deltas. IPCC had flagged that sea level around Asia in the North Indian Ocean have increased faster than the global average with coastal area loss. As per the Global Climate Risk Index 2021, released by the International Environmental Think Tank German Watch also, India ranked 7th position in matters of the climate risk. The sea level along the Indian coast was rising at about 1.7 millimeters per year, according to the Indian National Center for Ocean Information Services. And if you look at the UN Ocean Conference, 600 million people live in coastal areas that are 10 meters above sea level and which constitute 10% of the world's population. And India has more than 8,000 kilometer coastline with 130 cities situated near the coastline and 250 million people living within 15 kilometers from the coast. In India, Gujarat has the longest coastline, that is 1,600 kilometers, and greater population density also. The coastal population of Gujarat coast is majorly involved in farming or fishing for their livelihood. Yes.
Danya, please focus on your methodology and findings because we have very limited time. So
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Focus on your methodology and findings.
Sure, sir. So here we have defined we have given an operational definition to the livelihood. So for the purpose of this study, we define livelihood as means to livelihood or occupation, which is the source of income of the targeted sample group and is essential to fulfill the basic requirements of their life. And we have considered only the coastal people involved in agriculture or the farmers for our study. The main objective or aim of the study was to understand the status and perspective of coastal farmers on the impact of climate change on coastal farming and the mitigation strategies adopted by the community to sustain the same. The study also has evaluated the initiatives taken by the government to control the same. So as you can see, the objectives we have we wanted to examine and understand the awareness of coastal population on 3 different areas. One is climate change and its impact on their livelihood, and also the initiatives taken by the government. And we also wanted to investigate and find out the impacts of climate change on the right to livelihood of farmers living in this area, and also to evaluate the level of implementation of policies and schemes to protect, prevent, and control the impacts of climate change and the sea level rise on the Kutch region. So the process of the research was that, as I mentioned, this was an empirical research. So actually using the sampling techniques, we have identified 7 talukas of Kutch region for this particular study. And the study was conducted into identified households based on convenient sampling. And we have identified 8 households in each 7 talukas, and we administered a questionnaire. It was a semi-structured questionnaire with around 35 to 40 questions for the study, and the analysis was like univariate, bivariate, and pros tabulations were done to find out the results. So as I mentioned, the data sources or the target groups were the farmer households in coastal talukas of Kutch district, and the data collection tool which we have used was a semi-structured questionnaire. So this is the sample frame of this particular study. So you can see that we have targeted the Lakhpat, Abadasa, Mandvi, Mundra, Gandhidham, Kandla, and Ran of Kutch area of the Kutch district for our study. And the right hand side, you can see the map of this particular region. So the findings and the discussion part. So I would like to highlight the first figure, which shows that we were actually, the first part of our objective was to understand the awareness of respondents on climate change. So in the study, it was found that the respondents were aware of the environmental pollution. So it was almost 88.4% of the respondents were aware of the environmental pollution, whereas the adjacent figure, which shows that they were not having much awareness about the green gas effect. So it was only 16% of the respondents were aware about the green gas effect. And similarly, when we talk about the climate change and the sea level rise also, though the awareness level regarding the climate change was 71%, whereas the sea level rise, which is happening in Kutch coast, only 50.9% of the people were aware of this. And we also have done a study to understand the awareness of respondents on the restrictions applicable in the CRZ and non-permitted areas in relation to various activities. So the Ministry of Environment and Forest in 1991, under Section 3 Clause 1 and 3 Clause 2, 5 of the Environment Protection Act 1986 and Rules 5 Clause 3D of the Environment Protection Rules 1986 has declared coastal stretches in the country as coastal regulation zone. And through this notification, the government aimed to prevent certain activities like setting up of new industries and expansion of existing industries in these zones, and manufacture or handling or storage of disposal of hazardous substances to the sea, setting up and expansion of fish processing units, including warehousing in this region, discharge of untreated effluents and waste into the from the industries to these regions. So all these things were, it was the intention of this particular regulation. But on approaching these people, that what we could understand was that majority of them were not aware of any of these provisions, which is being made applicable to these regions. And Moving on to the awareness of respondents on coastal zone information system developed by the Gujarat government. So this is a system implemented with an objective to design and develop database and to provide user-friendly GIS software to retrieve better integrated, spatial and non-spatial information to generate a coastal zone management plan, and it helps better integrated coastal management and planning. So in this particular question on awareness, we found that only 6% of the farmer households were aware of this step taken by the government. And this particular figure is giving the picture of awareness of respondents on extent of rights they can enjoy in the coastal areas. And the yellow figure is graph representation is showing the percentage of people who have answered as no, and blue says yes. So we can see that majority of them were not aware of this particular rights that they can enjoy in the coastal region also. And the awareness of respondents on nodal agency or departments administering regulations also, we have seen that very less awareness is there. Only 1.8% of the people are aware of the nodal agency or department administering the regulations in their region. So then we also have taken a survey. There was a question on responses on becoming victims of flood. So this particular figure shows that majority of them were answered that they are not victims of flood, though the floods are happening in their coast. But 28.6% of them have answered that they have been victims of the flood. Then next figure 11 is shows that 30% of the respondents have opined that the climate change is.
Ma'am, please wrap up.
Sorry.
Ma'am, please wrap up. You have already exhausted the time limit.
Yes, I am minding up. So, opined that the climate change is inducing displacement and migration at their coast. And coming to this one, how climate change is and allied phenomena in the area is affecting or whether it is endangering their life. They have 67.90% said that it is impacting their yield. So there is decrease in yield as a result of the same. And regarding the question on whether saltwater intrusion in the coastal water is whether there is saltwater intrusion, 50% believe that there is saltwater intrusion also. So this is a graph which is a table which is given by the Gujarat Ecology Commission report. This has already been acknowledged by Gujarat Ecology Commission also, because if you look at the last column, it is talking about the second last column, Kutch. So out of all 242 villages of Kutch is having are fully saline. So this is just a pictorial representation of the same. All these red areas are fully saline. Then responses on how saltwater intrusion is affecting the agricultural production also, 57% responded that there is decrease in their yield. Then on question on whether they have changed their crop pattern, because this is something which is widely seen in the coastal region. So 18.8% have said that they have changed the crop pattern. And on the question whether the government departments have approached them for changing the crop pattern or with any kind of help, though there also be so that there is very less support from the government department, or many of them have answered that they have not received any support, no education or no mitigation strategy has been introduced by the government. So while concluding, so we came across this Gujarat Ecology Commission has acknowledged the existing water salinity and issues of salinity ingress in the region, and same is impacting their coastal saline their yield also. But coastal salinity prevention cell is working on sustainable approach to enhance the productivity, and they have also engaged in intercropping of vegetable and pulses with main crop, and they are also introduced a number of saline resistant varieties of grams and other other vegetables and wheat to this region. But majority of the people are like, I have not included all those graphs here, but majority of the people are not aware of all these initiatives which has been taken by the government. But as like Hani's presentation, she has already mentioned about the kind of work Tata Trust is doing. So in this region also Tata Trust is very active, and due to with their help, the people some kind of like improvement, or they are able to sustain the livelihood. So some of the recommendations that we in the coastal region, as there is considerable increase in the natural disasters like coastal flood, cyclone, sea level rise, salinity increase, acidification of ocean, etc. Connection between the sea and inland river body should be isolated through embankment of suitable size between bank of river and the sea. Adaptation measures to improve the livelihood of coastal farmers is another solution. Capacity building program or some kind of training can be given to these people, maybe with the help of NGOs, and also community participation is something which we would like to recommend. And next is the policy intervention is required, and we also would like to suggest the collaborative efforts by different government departments like Department of Climate Change, Agriculture, Social Justice, Health and Family Welfare, etc., to make this the implementation of these programs more effective. Then another thing that I would like to suggest is applying human right based approach to climate. So this is something which is being discussed in the international forum also now, that will help to overcome this program, and making local governments more decentralizing the power, and making local governments more involved in this mitigation activities also will be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dhanya. I
Yes,
feel
sir.
she has already taken much time. So if Mr. Kishore, if you have any important question, then we can ask. Otherwise, we can go to the next speaker.
Yes, I think we should switch over to next participant.
Stuti?
Calling upon our last presenter, we have Ms. Megha Chaturvedi and Mr. Karan Bhola presenting on spoils of Adam and Eve on Eden, the misfortune brought on Mother Nature by wars and nuclear scientific interferences made by the mankind.
Please stick to the time limit. Speaker,
Definitely,
please.
sir. Definitely. Thank you, Stuti. Greetings to one and all. A very warm good afternoon. I, Megha Chaturvedi, will be presenting on the topic Spoils of Adam and Eve on Eden, the misfortune brought on Mother Nature by wars, nuclear and scientific interferences made by the mankind. May I be allowed to share my screen?
Sure.
Okay. Is it visible to everyone?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So as my topic suggests, that we are going to revolve around that how from historian mankind, where the Mother Nature is worshipped for its divinity, that mammal has come to the point where we are suited in tie and not caring about our resources. And in that greed, we have become blind to that extent that in every war, the great disaster has been put up to our natural resources and our environment. So with proceeding with that, I would just start with a quote that the greatest threat to Earth is the belief that someone else will save it. Only if everyone can start with their bit to save it, we would have been at a better situation. Now our paper has been divided into three parts: the historian look, the present look, and the future look. So let's look at the historian facts and dig upon it. As we know, it is not a new discovery that wars pose a great threat to the Earth's environment. And the nuclear weapons which are now being used with technological advancement has made the things worse. So this advancement of technology, no matter, has maybe tried to be a boon for us, but in all the other ways, it has only degraded our environment. So these weapons are a source of... Yeah.
Just a minute. It will be better if you focus on the present and the future instead of going in the historical background, because we have very limited time. So just it is a humble suggestion from my end.
I'll stick to it, just a little brief. I'll come to the wars directly. Basically, the wars are not being taught to us in a way that that we were ever known that how much impact has been done to our environment. We all know that World War I took place from 1914 to 1918, how many people died, how much countries were destroyed, but we were never told that how much environment damage it had. So just an overview of it, that deadly weapons were unleashed for the first time in World War I. The farmlands in the countryside in France were badly destroyed. French warfare was done. Over 250,000 acres of farmland was devastated. Similar was the impact in Somme, United States, and farmers were forced to grow crops to meet out the needs of the warfare. Similar, but a very worse kind of impact was done during the time of World War II. We know the sadden effect which was caused by Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but it was even more worse in the time of Europe, Norway, and Germany. At the same time in Japan, the Hiroshima and Nagasaki did not just lead to damage to the humans, but it caused a great environment disaster, which we are still feeling right now. The nuclear radiations are of that massive amount that both the soil and water has made the land inhospitable to both plants and animals. And in addition, there were considerable fires, acid rain, massive erosion at the same time. So the Japanese ecosystem has been broadly and brutally destroyed by these wars. The third war, I'll just jump into very quickly to Vietnam War. Vietnam War is one of the wars which for the first time saw a strategy which was used for environment destruction only. So to win a war, the strategies were such that forest fires were made to be done, that we were deliberately destroying our environment to win a war. That greed went to that level. So I have mentioned about Operation Ranch Hand, the Agent Orange, which are the technical names and the ways in which the environment was brutally disturbed. The chemicals which were designed to kill grass, foliage, and leaving the soil too infertile. Not only it led to destruction of plant life, but also caused defects in animals, including humans. Again, I'll skip to the next one of the great observed impact on environment, that was Iraq invasion. Similarly, in Iraq invasion, environment was used as a weapon to win the war. We all know that at the same time, Saddam Hussein knew that he was not able to win the war, but at the same time, he was trying to put fires on the oil fields he had, all the oil reserves he had, so that he can keep the enemies away from him for a longer period of time. But just the impact was never considered. The oil fields were put on fire. There was so much carbon dioxide released into the environment, which combined with water and formed acid rain. There was severe destruction in the surrounding area and polluted both the water and food supplies. And it had a long-term impact on the environment, as destroying hundreds of pipelines of oil and released millions of gallons of oil into the ocean. Oceanic life was disturbed. Everything was disturbed. There are many other incidents from the history which I will not touch, but I'll just talk about it, like the accident of Chernobyl, the war in Yemen or Syria, Israel-Gaza conflict, and the ongoing crisis with Ukraine and Russia. Now, coming to the legal action of the world community, there have been a lot of talks going upon. There have been a lot of debates in the United Nations. Various conferences we have heard about: Stockholm Conference, Rio Summit 1992. There are various international conventions, which I'll just talk about in brief. Prior to 1972 Stockholm Conference, majority of environmental conventions were related to conservation of wildlife. But after 1972 Stockholm Conference till the 1992 Rio Summit, we had a change in variety, and from wildlife we shifted to protection of fauna as well. So there was a Declaration of United Nations Conference of Human Environment 1972, which developed a 109-pointer environmental action plan and a resolution recommended institutional and financial implementation by the UN. And the result of the recommendations were that UNEP, United Nations Environmental Program, was established by UNGA in 1972, which is based eventually in Nairobi. In 1992 conference, Rio Summit is one of the most popular conference. The idea of sustainable development was put to implementation for the first time. Again, a very important question arises that we have been talking about sustainable development since for the past 30-40 years, but is the sustainable development really sustainable? With the same agenda, are we able to sustain our environment? Looking at the wars, the scientific and the non-scientific launches which are being done at the present moment. Similarly, came after a while the development goals in the United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP21, COP24, COP25, and to accelerate its actions, 2030 agenda came in the recent and the Paris Agreement. Similarly, there were various commissions set up like Commission for Sustainable Development as subsidiary of ECOSOC, and it had the primary responsibility for addressing environmental issues and concerns. Yet alarming situation of environmental degradation is worsening with time. And the question whether sustainable development is really sustaining the environment is not yet answered by the United Nations authorities. Then there are also principles in international humanitarian law. That is, the international humanitarian law only deals with the law at the time of warfare. The warfare that we are focusing right now, the world wars, the Iraq, the Israel conflict, the Gaza conflict, what we can also see in Ukraine and Russia. So the Geneva Conventions also try to protect the environment during warfare. Like there are certain provisions that what in architecture not to be destroyed, what particular area should not be used as a tactic to prevent your own army or population. Similar conventions are there like Nuclear Test Ban Treaty and Non-Proliferation Treaty, which ask the countries to submit their nuclear weapons with the P5 nations so that they are not able to, so the P5 nations will protect them, hypothetically, which has not resulted good for Ukraine in the present war. So now I'll come to directly to the present, and now we'll explore the present, what has been happening. So the race is evolving around one's existence from addressing questions that has haunted mankind since time to addressing the question that will be his nightmares now. In much simpler terms, innovation discovery has led to humans to great distance. And ironically, the discovery Rankin cycle in the 1st century AD discovered by George Bretton in 1872, then by Mr. Robert Goddard in 1882 to 1945, finally by Robert Oppenheimer for developing nuclear bomb, has led to only the peace, has not led to getting us the peace, but only disrupting the peace. So it has come with a price. Now, what is the price? These are the non-scientific launches I'll be talking about, that which are not used for scientific purposes, but for the warfare purposes to prevent our country from a greater harm. But to prevent our country from getting invaded or annexed by any other country, we are yet destructing our environment in such nuclear tests which have been conducted by not only just our country, India per se, but all the countries have been doing it since forever. Examples would be Vayu Shakti 2022, which is in its whole swing in India for its weapons and power demonstration. And similarly, there are escalated tensions in South China Sea. So US holds joint military exercise with Japan in the South China Sea. And again, coming to the Ukraine-Russia conflict, we are very well aware that what kind of destruction has been happening to the architecture and the fauna and the flora. So that is the least concern of the whole mankind, that what is happening to our wildlife or our flora. Each and every launch, now we'll talk about scientific launch which helps us to gain.
Wrap up. Please wrap up, your time is over.
Okay, so I'll just come to the conclusions. So my first conclusion is about use of nuclear products and spoils of war. So the wastage of war is not being used properly, not disposed of properly, which is why a long-term impact has been seen on the flora and the fauna. So first suggestion is to proper dispose of the nuclear war and the nuclear product wastage, so that we are able to have, we do not have a long-term radioactive impact on the environment. And the second would be that should the change in the thinking, don't put me first, change. As in the initially I talked about that in the Vedic era, the whole environment was worshipped and it was considered divine. So when you consider something divine, you do not go and harm that particular thing. Even at the time of our Vedic era, there were wars. There were great wars, but there were certain rules that what not has to be touched. So if certain human-friendly and environmental peace protection rules are again devised from our Vedic age, we can do better than the Geneva Conventions we are already using. And another thing I would say that they take national and international initiatives and diversify the fauna. So another suggestion to rectify the harm already done is creating awareness at the initial stage. people must digest that their deeds might lead to human extinction, not today, but tomorrow or for the future generation, as we say that whether the sustainable development is sustaining the environment or not. Till date, various initiatives have already put in place by the international community, but we still believe that it is not just in the hands of few people who are sitting at the conventions to do something for the environment. It is a whole collective product and collective job to do so. So there should be more awareness and more interest from the side of the people of the whole world. Thank you. I'll put it to rest now.
So directly, Stuti,
Yes, sir.
और कोई है?
No, sir.
It is last
To the
paper.
last presenter. Yes.
Okay. So before I invite my co-chair, Mr. Kishore Rithe, for his overall comment, is there any question from the audience or participants? Is there any point or comment to be raised by any participant? No. If there is no question, then I will request my co-chair, Mr. Kishore Rithe, for your overall comment on the whole session.
Thank you very much, sir. I really enjoyed all the sessions, all the presentations, and people have worked really hard to gather the data and observations and form their opinion and present it here. No doubt, initial presentations were a little bit lengthy, and but people tried very best. Thanks to organizers, because they have selected probably the papers which have touched upon all the aspects, including war and its impact on the environment. So really, it was interesting to see how people have people in the academic sector have really grabbed all the current issues and tried to address these issues. So we have today discussed the issues of biodiversity conservation to wildlife conservation and wildlife trade and poaching involved, and how the legislations can be effectively used to address these issues. And the SDG goals, sustainable development, and some of the presenters have questioned on the sustainability itself. That was quite interesting. And the one presentation on the coastal area and CRZ notification was very interesting, and it's a really interesting study. But most of the violators, which comes from the industrial sectors, they are quite aware about CRZ violations, CRZ regulations, and still they violate. And most of the community which is actually not violating the CRZ regulations, they are unaware. So that was quite interesting study for me. And the energy, and especially the nuclear energy, was addressed during one of the presentations, and that was very interesting. But in the context of climate change, we need to relook at the entire energy scenario and how our country, because in that presentation, the presenter has given scenario about different nations, but he has not focused on India and how we can really suggest or make India or build India in energy sector and make it self-reliant. So definitely there are dangers in nuclear power, etc. But now today, India is really going very fast in adopting renewable energy sources. And if you look at our installed capacity today, we should be really happy where we are today. And Indian government is really going very fast in this case. So agriculture sector also we have discussed today. And sir had really pointed out very well that that presentation could not reach to the real aspect and real pains involved in the agriculture sector. So, but overall, there were very good presentations, and I really enjoyed these presentations. I was actually rushing from the field to the city, but I enjoyed all these presentations in the journey. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Kishore, for your wrap up, and you have nicely summarized all the presentations. So my work has become very simple. Since I have to attend another meeting at 2:30, so I will be very brief. So it was very nice. So at the outset, I would like to thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity to share my views and to interact with you all, and particularly Sri Kishore Rithe Saab, that I am very happy to share a platform with you, and we have benefited from your vast experience, and you have nicely wrapped up the whole presentation and summarized. So I will not go into detail because I have to, as I said, I have to leave it. So just I have to make 2 points here only. If you see, the total global population is going to be 9 billion by 2050. And by that, to feed that much population, we have to double our production. And what is the presently, basically, what is the productivity is facing a stagnation problem. So this is the one challenge. And out of, if you see, the almost the 50 to 80% of the population that is present in the developing country, they had the highest population growth rate and lowest output. So that is our basically gray area. So the chances of doubling the production is very, very remote. So we have to think in on that line. And on the other hand, you see there is a depletion of the natural resources. It is the soil organic carbon, it is the groundwater is receding, it is the loss of soil, it is the top cover loss, it is the nutrient leaching, etc., etc., etc. And whatever the negative impacts of the green revolution are there, we are all knowing all those things. So the challenge is really very difficult, and we have to face it. So what is our concern is that if you see the top 1% of the global emitters are basically responsible for the 15% of the total global emission. 1% is contributing 15%. And if you see the bottom 50% population of the total world is accounted just for 10% global emission. So this is the very, very important thing that we have to keep in mind whenever we are talking about the climate change and other all those aspects. So if you see, even, and we have 3.6 billion people globally that are below the poverty line, 3.6 billion. And we have to, if raise their status above poverty line, it will increase the carbon footprint just by 18% only. Whereas if we, the top world 50% emitters, if half their carbon footprints, it will reduce the global emission by 40%. So that can be done. The question is that whether the even has the that will or not, whether we can force the developed countries to accept all the challenges or not. So that can be done, but it is the question of the willpower, it is the question of the polarization, it is the, you know, all the sorts of the global balances that is playing role in all these issues. As far as the routine conferences are concerned, normally we have to make some recommendations. That is the tradition that we are making. So just what I see that two recommendations can be made. One that was suggested by our co-chair, Dr. Kishore, that only mitigative measures are not sufficient to tackle the problem. So we have to take the proactive measures, and basically the evidence is the best policy. So this is the one recommendation that I feel it should be go as a recommendation. And second one, we have talked about the Tata model, that CSR is playing a good role, but how to multiply this model? So can we recommend that there must be a significant proportion of the CSR fund must go for the biodiversity conservation and ecological restoration. So I feel these two recommendations can go from our session as a recommendation. So thank you so much, all the participants and my co-chair and the organizers. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir, for enlightening all of us. On this note, our third technical session for the International Symposium comes to an end. We are eternally grateful to our dignitaries, Dr. Rajesh Pratap Singh and Mr. Kishore Rithe, for sparing time for us and honoring us with their presence. Thanks to all the speakers for their participation and for sharing their valuable knowledge with all of us. Thanks all Thanks to all the attendees for making the session successful. With this, we conclude the event. Thank you for joining us. You may stay back to record your attendance by filling in the link posted in the chat box. Thank you.
The participants are requested to stay back as they have to fill up the attendance link that has been shared in the chat box.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.